equipment. And if you use a small test tube like that, you'll get some numbers, but you have a pretty large margin of error when you're dealing with such a small vessel. So I boosted things up, and this is actually a reasonably good size. That's a 100 milliliter graduated cylinder. But if you see there, the water rises up that tube as the oxygen is consumed by the steel wool. Now, you can't see the steel wool in this picture, but it's up in that clamp. There's a clamp holding that thing, right? That graduated cylinder. So that steel wool is behind that clamp, so you can't see it. It's up above it. But it's the same as that test tube that I showed you, that picture. Okay? And if you see, that water level rises. Now, in the general sense, the general picture would be that you would expect that water to rise. It's all oxygen that's being consumed here. You would expect that water level to rise to be in proportion to the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. So basically, if you have a tube, 20 inches long or whatever, and the oxygen content is 20%, then it would rise about, what would that be, 4 inches, 20%, 20% of your tube length, whatever that is, okay? That's what you expect to see, is that air column should occupy roughly 20% of that tube by the time you're done. This is what all should happen. I did it. I didn't know what to expect. Okay? It was a perfectly open experiment. Well, what I get to report on tonight is after this several years of uncertainty, after being, let's call it a little bit nubbed by the existence of statements being made that had no basis, and especially in some degree attributing them to me, we get to report that life is normal as far as we are able to measure, at least in terms of my experiment. I did the work. The actual oxygen content of this of the atmosphere is very, very close to 21%. Okay? Something like 20.95. The result I got was, call it, every experiment has air. Okay, and I've spent a lot of my life analyzing air. My actual number was roughly 20.5 versus 21%. Okay, within the range of my measurement tools and the setup of the experiment, which I even enhanced by making it a little bit bigger, the results of my experiment say that we still have air. Okay, we still have oxygen. Now, some of us might take this stuff lightly, but I don't. Okay, the oxygen content of the atmosphere is why we are here. And if you had any kind of change going on at that level, you could bet we should know about it. And if somebody's going to say that it's screwed up, then we better be able to document it. Now, I'm not saying there might be minuscule or even changes in the atmosphere. I'm saying within the range of experimental error that I was able to establish, the results show that the oxygen content of the atmosphere is exactly in accordance with what we expect. And so the point of this whole discussion to begin with was back to the original claim and statement that we have to do our work. Somebody has to do the work. And we cannot just say things. And we should not just repeat them because they happen to be popular. And, we learn there are problems. We learn there are serious problems. But we also learn what is. And in this case, fortunately, it's not crazy, because I did some research also during setup of this experiment. And in my research, the work was basically saying that if we ever got down to 19.5% or less, we would be in an oxygen-deprived state, and we would be in serious problems in terms of life. Now, I didn't know that before I worked, but anybody that had found that statement would have already had a direct contradiction to the statement of a drop down to 16% oxygen. And we see that statement was absurd, is what it amounts to. So I'm here tonight to circulate the results of that experiment and to let it be known that this is what happened. And I don't have an agenda. when I'm doing these experiments. There may be something of interest and intrigue, but I don't have an agenda, and so on this account at least, we get to say that at least we still get to breathe. With whatever else is happening, we actually get to breathe, and it's what it should be. And the fine differences that may well exist for all kinds of reasons. You can start looking into oxygen changes, but those levels are at fractions of a percent, which is a much more realistic thing to be measuring, or else you have serious problems. I did some work on the Schumann resonance, and the same kind of thing was going on with that. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but the same kind of thing was said with respect to the fundamental resonant frequency of the Earth, called the Schumann resonance, which is roughly about 8 hertz. And, they were saying this thing had changed by 2 or 3 hertz. Again, 25%. Okay? I did some research on it. I didn't actually do the work, but I did some research and found the papers. And I'll tell you, if you start dealing with the fundamental resonant frequency of the Earth, I did find changes. I did find changes in the work, in the research, but it was on the order of fractions of a percent, which is the type of thing you would expect, or else this Earth has serious problems in a cosmic sense. If we start, we're not going to go into it tonight, but if you start changing things at that level, you're in serious trouble. So anyway, that's the whole point of this one. Okay, is that let's just do the work and let's seek it out. And obviously, one of the things I'm leading to tonight is that the Institute will try to do this work the best it can. We're going to need help, lots of help, and lots of equipment, and lots of skilled personnel down the road. I can't go learning every single thing. I used to work with stereo plotter, with photogrammetry work, and I tell you, you can spend your whole life mastering a single piece of equipment. We have all types of equipment that would be needed to do the work properly, because it certainly doesn't seem to be being done on our behalf by anyone on public sense. So it's going to have to be done. And I guess I'm letting you know that this is how I approach things. And let's find out the answers to the things we need. And we need a lot of really serious answers. And we have strong hints of certain predicaments that exist, some very strong hints, with some very good and sustained work behind it over many, many years. But we will always need to elevate that to a higher level of documentation in order to establish the eventual truth and to convey the accuracy of those results to a wider audience. This is what will have to be done, and it cannot be placed within any single individual. And the Institute is small fry. It is, I admit it, okay? It's small fry, but it's the best thing I can do, and maybe someday it won't be small fry. It's pretty clear what needs to be done, and if I saw it being done in some other way, then I wouldn't have had to, along with others, create this organization to say, hey, it's time to get on with more serious business, and this is not within the purview of any single individual. Okay? All right. The next one, and as usual, I'm always going to run out of time. I'm hilarious. I'm really good on budgeting my own time with my work, but I'll tell you, when we get going on these things, the way I'm going, we'd be here for 2 hours. So let's go on to the next one. And I won't talk about this too much, at least I say that, but this has to do with the same type of issue, and that is there are certain statements and claims being made about the existence of certain physical entities, and that these physical entities have some course. It's that some part, okay, that's the part that would bother me. But they would have some correspondence or correlation with the Morgellons condition, which many of you know I worked on extensively over the past several years, and that's where much of the focus of the work has been now for this past several years. And in the foreseeable future, it looks like it's going to be that way. I'm not out here to say true or false. I'm just saying I'm once again getting the sense that there is talk of certain things as being representative of a state of affairs, but I'm saying I don't see the work at this point. Now, it just may be that I'm not familiar with it. but I don't see the work yet that justifies it to the level